This is the Bureau of Lost Culture. I'm Stephen Coates. I'm here with my colleague at the Bureau, Paul Hartfield, and a very, very special guest. It's the first and possibly the only time that we've had a member of royalty join us here at the Bureau, and you'll find out why in a few moments. The Bureau is dedicated to recollecting or collecting forgotten, half-remembered, lost, or just rare countercultural stories. We're interested in narratives of resistance where individuals have stood against the establishment and small things have fought big things. Well, this is a shorter episode than usual, and that's appropriate because it's an episode about small things. Small countries, in fact. Micronations. What is a micronation? Well, if you look up on Wikipedia, a micronation is defined, I suppose, as a political entity whose members claim they belong to an independent nation or sovereign state, lacking legal recognition by world governments. Most are very small, but range in size from a single square foot, that is small, to millions of square feet. They're usually the outgrowth or the project of a single individual. Now, there are various micronations around the world, and they've been around really for at least for the last 50 years, and a few of them I'm going to list here. There is Operation Atlantis, an early 1970s New York-based libertarian group built a concrete-hulled ship called Freedom, which they sailed to the Caribbean, intending to permanently anchor it as their territory, but unfortunately it sank in a hurricane. Oops. There's the Republic of Minerva, another libertarian project that succeeded in building a small man-made island on the Minerva Reefs south of Fiji in 1972 before being invaded by troops from Tonga, who annexed it before destroying the island. Dang. What about the Republic of Rose Island, an artificial island constructed in 1968 by Italian architect Giorgio Rosa in the Adriatic Sea? It was built originally as a tourist attraction, but soon after it's finished, Rosa declared it as an independent sovereign state. The Italian Navy promptly dynamited it the following year. That sucks. There is the global country of world peace. There is Asgardia. There's the Free Republic of Liberland, founded in 2015. It claims a small parcel of land between Croatia and Serbia. Some of the land is claimed by both countries, and other bits are claimed by neither. Free Republic of Liberland has established formal relations with Somaliland. That sounds hopeful. What about the Principality of Hutt River, a farm in Western Australia which claims to have succeeded from Australia to become an independent principality? I like this one, the Crown Dependency of Forvik, which is an island in Shetland currently recognised as part of the UK, but Stuart Hill claims that independence comes from an arrangement struck in 1468 between King Christian I of Denmark and Scotland's James III, whereby Christian pawned the Shetland Islands to James in order to raise money for his daughter's dowry. Stuart Hill claims that the dowry was never paid, therefore it's not part of the UK and should be a crown dependency like the Isle of Man. He's also encouraged the rest of Shetland to declare independence. The list goes on. But really, we're here today to talk about a particular small country, a micronation not too far away from here, actually. And in some ways, it's one of the most well-established micronations in the world, as you'll find out, I think. And that is the Principality of Sealand. It's a micronation that claims Ruff's Tower, an offshore platform in the North Sea, approximately 12 kilometres off the coast of Suffolk as its territory. Ruff's Tower is a disused Maunsell sea fort, originally built as an anti-aircraft gun platform by the British during the Second World War. Since 1967, it's been occupied by a family and the associates of a certain Paddy Roy Bates, once a major in the British Army, who claimed that it's an independent sovereign state. And we are very pleased that today, with us here at the Bureau of Lost Culture, we have Paddy's son, Prince Michael of Sealand. Welcome, Prince Michael.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
No, is it okay to call you Michael from now on?
Call me whatever you like.
Okay, good. Michael, listen, welcome. For anybody who doesn't know about Sealand, could you just tell the story of the past briefly about what it is and how it came about?
Well, I suppose it all began back in the early 1960s when my father got involved with the phenomenon known as pirate radio. These were radio stations offshore on either ships or some of the stations broadcast from the old wartime fortresses that were put across the entrance of the Thames to defend against the German bombers that were following the Thames up to London to bomb London. Some of them were army forts and set out like an anti-aircraft battery on shore, and some were naval forts manned by the Navy and the Marines, and they were a bit further offshore. My father took over one of these forts and put Radio Essex on the air, and then the government brought in the Marine Offences Act, which effectively closed him down. It made it illegal to not just to broadcast, but to work for them, to be a disc jockey, a DJ on the stations, to supply them with fuel or food, or even have pay for advertising. So it put him out of business. So he looked for a better jurisdiction to reopen his radio station, and he came across the Ruffs Towers, which is off Harwich and Felixstowe, on the Suffolk coast, much further out to sea than the other one. So Christmas Eve 1966, I went out with him. I was 14 years old, and took it over. And anyway, so he took all his staff and his DJs and his transmitters and generators and everything there. But in the meantime, he had the bizarre idea of declaring independence. He decided it was just the same time when Ian Smith was performing with Rhodesia and declaring UDI, and Harold Wilson was doing regular trips down to Rhodesia and having meetings with him. And in fact, there's a very famous to us anyway, cartoon in the Sun, and it's meant to depict my mother, my father, myself, and my sister, a very rough-looking motley crew, I have to say, in the cartoon, leaning over the side of the fort with a shotgun, and there's a fellow in a dinghy and a skiff beneath. And my mother turns to my father and says, "He says his name's Smith and wants to know how we got away with it." I have it on my wall at home. It was quite a nice little thing. You can't.
Well, I mean, just to go back a little bit, what was it like for you being a 14-year-old embarking on that sort of adventure? It's like a boy's own adventure. I mean, your father sounds like this extraordinary character. Actually, maybe you could, first of all, just tell us a little bit about your dad, because he sounds like an amazing person.
Well, my father made his way down to the Spanish Civil War, prior to the World Wars and everything else, and I think he ended up fighting on both sides. He was there for the adventure, not for a cause. And eventually he was captured and deported, I think, back to the UK, or to Gibraltar, as it happens. But he was an interesting character. I mean, he actually said to me many times that he enjoyed the war. It's not a politically correct thing to say, but he was an adventurer, and a risk taker. So, I mean, he was sitting on a rock in Iraq, in the army, and there's two snakes. He's watching these two snakes, and he's bored, and he starts throwing stones at the snakes. And he didn't realise at the time they were actually copulating snakes. It must have been snake breeding season or something. So one of these snakes flashed across and bit him on his thigh. And I remember as a boy he still had this quite big scar on his thigh where he carved it open with a razor blade and drank a bottle of whiskey. All the things you're really not meant to do. But having said that, I still use the phrase he used in later life, and that was, "Always keep a bottle of whiskey in the house, son, because you never quite know when you might get bitten by a snake."
Love it. So as a 14-year-old boy, you're presumably used to his adventuring ways by then, but that's quite something if your dad says to you, "Look, to you and your sister and your mum, come on, get together. We're going to take off to this fort." And you said you took it over. Come in, elaborate on that. What does it mean to take over a fort?
Well, it was Christmas Eve 1966, and Radio Caroline actually had some people on this fort. And it was dark, and there was no power out in this thing, and there was a bit of string hanging down from one of the lower landing stages, and one of my fellows managed to climb up it and throw the rope ladder down, and we all climbed up it, and there was two fellows on there from Radio Caroline. One had an air rifle, I remember, and I don't know what the other one had, but one of our fellows came up behind him and took the rifle off. There was no violence involved at all. You said, "Pack your bags," and we took them ashore to Harwich the next day. After that, Radio Caroline and various thugs from London were sent out there, I suppose sponsored by Caroline. There was, I think, as many as 7 different boarding parties attempted. And I was, as I say, I was 14 years old, and I was making up Molotov cocktails and all sorts of devices to, swinging on ropes, and if someone opened the door, we balanced oxygen bottles all around the rail, so if there was a boat underneath, we could just tip them over the side. You know.
I mean, it's obviously it was a different time. I mean, the 1960s and stuff like that. But even at the time, surely you must have been thinking, this is like the Wild West or something, wasn't it?
But it was like the Wild West, and it's actually been described like that a little bit in the past, in so much as you couldn't just pick up the phone. Well, there wasn't a phone anyway, and if there was, you couldn't pick up the phone and call the police. You know, like if you didn't look after yourself, like the Wild West. When they moved towards the West, they had to police themselves. You know, and that's it was exactly like that.
So what was it like for you? I mean, what did it feel like? Was it exciting, frightening? You know?
Oh, it was exciting. It was exciting. I mean, we were threatened by the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy were going to come. Harold Wilson had a meeting in 10 Downing Street, and he invited the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army. And he said, "Look, we think we might have another Cuba off the east coast of England here. What are we going to do about it? You know, who's going to go and take it over?" So they went away and came back, and obviously the Navy said, "Well, we've got the Marines and everything." He said, "We're geared up to do it. We can do it." But there is a bit of a problem. He said, "I think we might lose some lives here, and on behalf of either the Bates family, you know, my family, or the services." Wilson said, "Well, why is that?" He said, "Well, look," and they showed him a picture, and down the side of the fortress, I'd found this old tin of dried up paint and an old dried up paintbrush, and I wrote "Danger, 10,000 volts." And so I held back the power of the empire with a paintbrush and an old paintbrush and a bit of paint. So Wilson said, "Well, I'm not going to countenance people getting killed," and so they then tried a touch of subterfuge, and they sent 2 policemen out there. I thought they were ordinary policemen. It turns out they were military policemen, but they had the flat hats, like in those days. A senior officer used to wear a flat hat, not the silly pointy one that the others used to wear. And they couldn't climb the ladder, and the rope ladder. It's all in my book. They struggled to try and climb them. We invited them up to talk to them. My mother and I were out there, and I was only 14. But they couldn't climb the ladder, so I went down and talked to them on the boat, you know, and your father has sold us the fortress, and you know, he wants you to let some Marines up there, and this and that, and it went on for quite a long while. I said, "Well, just bring my dad back out," you know, and I was only 14, and he turned to the skipper, the policeman. He said, "It'll be dark then." He said, "Skipper, you can't bring this boat in underneath this fortress in the dark, can you?" And he said, "Oh no." I said, "Well, then I suggest you change your job then, because I can do it." You know, yeah, it was a great adventure.
And just to create a picture for anybody listening, Sealand is on something called Fort Rough, which is one of these World War II forts that were built. It's like 2 huge concrete cylinders standing upright in the North Sea off the coast of Suffolk in the UK. And on top of those 2 huge concrete cylinders, there's a platform, something like an oil rig a little bit, I guess. And on top of that, there's some buildings. And now there's a helipad there. In the Second World War, there would have been lots of weapons and guns and possibly radar and stuff. And it was one of these forts that were built in around about 1942 out in international waters. So, Michael, from what I understand, is that it was always... its ownership was always up for debate, right?
Well, no, but it wasn't up for debate. Obviously, the government and governments employ a lot of legal experts, and who pretty much the government said to them, "Look, we want you to work it this way," you know. And the government did try to claim it as their own, but in fact, the reality of the situation was, it was built during a time of war. It was built illegally during a time of war in international waters. Nobody gave a damn who built it or what was it. But where the British government fell down was they abandoned it in international waters. I mean, at the time, the territorial limits were 3 miles, which was a distance you could fire a cannonball and penetrate a foot of oak. In other words, the side of a warship, and so, you know, controllable territory.
So once you'd claimed it, or once your family had claimed it, and it became yours, and then just tell us what happened next. So how much time were you spending there, and what sort of things were you doing there, and you know, until it became the Principality of Sealand? Well,
I was away at boarding school in North Wales at the time, and then I went out there with my father. Things were difficult financially because the station had been closed down, and you know, there was no money about, and the staff were all giving up and everything else. And so I put my hand up on the boat out there one day. "Dad, I'll go up there and help look after it." I thought 6 weeks of adventure would be a bit of fun, you know, but I didn't realise it was nearly 60 years. I'm not saying I wouldn't have done it, but so I mean, I would spend as much as 6 months out there at a time sometimes, like we lived out there.
And what was life like that, a typical day?
It was pretty tough at first because there was no generators working. It was just we went from candles to hurricane lamps to tilly lamps to generators, like we worked up the ladder. And as I say, there was no money to finance things. The other strange thing that people might find hard to understand these days is there was no communication. There was no mobile phones or anything. The boat would go away and my dad would say, or whoever was on the boat would say, I'll see you be back in 2 weeks' time. And 2 weeks later he'd be staring off to the southwest with a pair of binoculars, hoping the boat would appear, and it wouldn't appear for another 2 weeks. Looking back, probably quite frustrating.
Yeah, but I mean, also you'd be stocked up with food and enough water, fresh water, food and whatever.
Well, we used to have to drag water out there, and the water you wouldn't believe. I mean, it's such a heavy commodity to drag up a seawall, down a load of steps along a concrete hard, and load into a dinghy and round to a boat. And then one day we thought, hang on, why don't we collect the rainwater? And you get a good old flash flood, and you put thousands of gallons in tanks. And
well, tell us about the weather. What was that like?
Obviously, you see all sorts of weathers. I mean. Originally, it was only small portholes. I mean, then we got double glazed windows, quite big double glazed windows. Fantastic for watching the weather through and during the storms. But obviously, we were marooned when the weather was bad.
And then, how did it evolve? Or the notion of Sealand as a micro nation, as a principality. When did that start to really take shape? And then you started, all the things that happened next, which is.
Well, we declared independence on September the 2nd, 1967. We raised the flag that we designed and announced to the world. We had the Sunday newspapers out there and people, running the story. And it just went on from there. As I say, in those days there was no communication, so it was hard for the rest of the world to get in touch with us and vice versa. Now, we have internet and everything out there. But we just pushed ahead. We had stamps made and coins but it was always also very difficult because you'd get some silver coins made we had some made in the Mexican Mint. And actually the fellow that did the deal with my father and that was actually very good to his word and did pay what he agreed to pay. But over the years, many people have not paid what they, what the contract said. I mean, to this day, you can buy orca coins, like orca whale coins. And the fellow in Florida was meant to, with the Mint, was meant to pay X amount to Wales, X amount to us, and obviously X amount himself. He'd never paid a penny to anybody, but you can still see them out there. So now we only ever market stuff that goes through our own online shop under our own control, and we make enough to finance what we do out there now.
And then in the 1970s, you started issuing passports as well, didn't you? And you issued hundreds of thousands of passports. And why were people buying them? Were people buying them as a sort of souvenir, or were they buying them because?
Well, funny enough, my son was just telling me last night that he's watching. On Netflix, there's something about the murder of Versace, and the fellow that killed Versace had a Sealand passport, I believe. Either he had one, or he ended up. The police caught him on a houseboat. It might be this. The police caught him on a houseboat, and the guy that owned the houseboat had a Sealand passport. But we didn't issue actually an awful lot, although there were a lot of fake ones issued. I can think to this at right now in this day and age. Why would you want a Sealand passport? Well, if I was on an aeroplane and some nasty terrorists got on it and took it over and they start separating all the different nationalities and I had an American passport, it would be the first passport I would eat, not the Sealand one.
Yeah. Show one of these and you'll be fine, actually. Yeah. So, and then time goes on, 70s gone, 80s gone. There was lots of events happening and stuff. Various people attack the fort, don't they? They try and take it from you. I mean, can you tell us about that, a little bit about that?
1978, there was probably the worst thing that's ever happened out there. I was there on my own. My father was in Austria with my mother, having a business meeting with a consortium of Dutch and Germans who would want to come in and raise a small island, a leisure island, and I think a casino and that sort of carry on. And my father couldn't come to an agreement with them. And again, it was before the times of mobile phones and communication, so I was pretty much out of touch out there. And this helicopter turns up, the Dutch National Airline, KLM, big blue helicopter turns up, and with a film crew on it and a couple of other guys. They couldn't land because there was masts on the top to stop helicopters landing. But this fella came down on a winch wire. They lowered him down, who I'd recognise as a German tax consultant I'd met once before with my father and another fella. And I ended up being locked up in this steel room, but it was basically a steel room, the living room out there, and it just had a tiny small porthole. And I was locked up in there for about 4 days, I think, with no food or water. they let me out at one point, and we ended up fighting, and I ended up tied up, my elbows tied together, my hands, my knees. They were going to throw me over the side. Interesting times.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and then I was locked up in this room, and then a Dutch trawler turns up, and with a load of reinforcements, and they offered that I could stay there, be taken to England by the boat, or taken to Holland. I said, well, I'll stay here. And then the people that had been out there with me said to the news guys, look, if he stays here, you've got to lock him back in the room because he's too dangerous to allow out, because I'd been fighting with him. So I said, OK, then take me to England. The skipper of the trawler wouldn't take me to England because he didn't want to be arrested for kidnap. So I ended up going to Holland. Landed illegally at Scheveningen with no passport. Managed to get back to England. A couple of days later, I met my father. We were going to go out in a rigid inflatable we had and climb, like, with a hook ladder, climb up the outside. But the weather was bad, and a German associate of ours who was mixing with the other people now as well phoned me up. He said, look, they're going to reinforce us with 10 ex-Belgian paratroopers with Uzi submachine guns. He said, and that's in 2 days' time. If you don't do it now, you'll never get it back. And I remember saying to him, well, and my father put me on the phone to talk to him. I remember saying to him, well, if it goes that way, I'll just swim a bloody great bomb underneath it and blow it up. I said, but I'm not going to leave it the way it is. And we phoned a friend of ours up, John Crutzen, who had a local helicopter company, and he had flown in several James Bond films, and terrific pilot. He flew in 633 Squadron and I think the dam busted and all that stuff. And he was a stunt pilot, and he no talk of money, and he said, no, of course I'll do it for you. So we took the seats out of the helicopter, and where was it? Southend Airport, like early hours of the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. That was it. 3 o'clock in the morning, Southend Airport. Climbed over the barbed wire perimeter fence and attached ropes to the airframe and everything else. Took the doors off it, and he got on the radio, Southend Tower. We're going to take dawn shots of Sealand, and off we went. And we got there just as it was breaking daylight, and I could see this yellow something strange on deck. We're flying a metre above the sea, standing outside on the skids, and I see this yellow thing on deck, and it's one of the Germans in a yellow oilskin, and he's sleeping in a chair. He's meant to be keeping watch. And the first thing he saw was the helicopter appear from underneath the platform. He said it frightened the shit out of him. And the fellow put the helicopter in over the top, the pilot, and we slid down ropes. And they were running out the building. I was the first one down, and they were running out the building below us. They were armed.
So what happened next?
We didn't shoot anybody. I jumped off the... I was the first one down, and I collapsed the mast so that the helicopter could land. I jumped off the top of what's the heli deck now. I suppose it's about 10 or 12 feet higher than the rest of it. And I had to jump out over a water tank down. I had a sawn-off shotgun in my hand, and as I hit the deck, the shotgun went off, and everybody stuck their hands up in the air.
Mm. And?
Oh, no, I didn't kill any of them. I nearly committed patricide because my dad came round the corner as well, but we got away with it all, and that was okay. So we locked them all up in a magazine down the bottom of the tower, which was quite an interesting place to be locked up because there's a valve so you can flood it in case of thing.
But I mean, the sort of joking aside, the atmosphere must have been incredibly tense, right? I mean, you've got guns, you've got enmity. They've mistreated you. I mean, you talked about it quite lightly, but they basically kidnapped you. They locked you up in a room for 4 days, dumped you in Holland. I mean, it's quite serious stuff, isn't it?
My father was. I mean, if the man had been out there, and when they tied me up, when I've been fighting, when they tied me up, they tied my hands up so tight, and they threw me back in the room, and they didn't undo my hands, and my hands had no feeling for days afterwards. Right. And my dad he did tell me afterwards, if that man had been there, I'd have smashed his hands up with a club hammer. Yeah.
So, I mean, it was very serious stuff. So, okay, you've taken them prisoner, retaken them prisoner, and then what happened?
Well, the German government went to the British government and said, do something, you're the nearest neighbours. And the British government said, there's nothing we can and will do. It's nothing to do with us. And so we ended up releasing the heavies, the hard men. But we kept one of these guys was a German lawyer, and he had a Sealand passport. He'd committed treason, so we held a a court case, and we had some journalists there and everything to witness it, make sure it went correctly. I think we didn't hang him or anything like that. We fined him, and of course we didn't get the money either. We ended up giving him money when we did eventually put him away. But the interesting part of that story was we had him there for about 6 weeks, I suppose, and originally obviously we locked him up, and then after a couple of days, it was really like they used to talk about in the war, like they captured German prisoners and they start handing photographs of their wives and children. After a couple of days he was living with us and everything. He was frightened that we were going to murder him every day. So we couldn't be more open. I mean, we were doing 24-hour-a-day watches, like 3 hours on, 3 hours off, and he'd asked to go with me, just with me, because he felt safe like when they were doing the watch in the middle of the night, and but anyway, so the Bond demands of a release of Herr Gernot Putz and all that was bandied about, and eventually the German the chief legal advisor to the German embassy in London came out to talk to us.
And so one of the things that's happened, isn't it, is that your case for Sealand being an actual state which should be recognised is that you communicated and had representation from the German government through a diplomat. Therefore, you've been given some sort of diplomatic recognition.
It's de facto recognition, yeah, without a doubt.
So was that after that finished, Michael? I mean, has there been any sort of serious, assaults on Sealand since, or was that that was the most serious? So basically, you give a very strong signal out. This is ours, and this is what happens if you're trying to take it off us, right? I
mean, when we, like when we did the helicopter assault, to show you how single-track-minded we were, it never even occurred to us to wear life jackets. Sliding down a rope 100 foot above the sea out of a helicopter in a gale of wind, never occurred to us to wear a life jacket. I mean, we get in a boat these days to do things. Of course, we should put a life jacket on, don't you, like in the normal run of things. But not when you've got a shotgun hanging around your neck.
So I was going to say sort of normal life resumed itself, but it's not a very normal life, is it? So after that, really, and of course, I suppose the next big thing that happens is that the British territorial waters are expanded beyond Sealand, at which point the British government is kind of saying, actually, we own you, or you're part of us.
We extended our waters to 12 miles the day before, and like with the Channel Islands, when they're a bit near France, they have a median line,
Right. So what is currently your sort of relationship with the British authorities?
We don't really bother much with them, and they don't really bother much with us. If they want to come and visit, we'll get the best china out. But,
I love it. As a result of this, I was just looking into, what it means to be a principality. I mean, Isle of Man is a self-governing British Crown dependency, whatever that is, right? Gibraltar, British overseas territory. The Vatican is an independent city-state. Monaco, Liechtenstein, they're principalities. They're microstates as well. So you're basically saying we're like Liechtenstein or Malta or one of those places.
Yeah, I mean, the phrase microstate really is I think is a phrase brought out about us, and I know you expanded about a lot these days. But yeah, there was, I mean, the world was, I mean, we've been in existence longer than Dubai. I mean, we got engaged in the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, right, in the restaurant there, highest restaurant in the world. But I said, Sealand's been in existence longer than Dubai has been a state. We have had the Sealand flag carried at the top of Mount Everest. I've got Kenton Coles down there holding it,
Well, and it is now, recognised, I suppose, as being, the microstate, the smallest country in the world, some people call it and stuff. So, in a strange way, you've almost become respectable, Michael.
I think that's probably what happens, isn't it? I know my dad died in 2012, and he died in October. And at the end of the year, the New York Times had a colour supplement, the 20 of the most interesting people that have died this year. And I think number 4 was Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, and number 5 was my dad. And there's an amazing, and they all had different pictures and things. And for him, they did a cartoon, and it was drawn by the Batman cartoon. It's all those bright reds and blacks and everything. And I've got it on my wall at home. It's fantastic. I mean, and it is the invasion of Sealand and how we took it back, and it's really cool.
Amazing. And then, of course, your dad died and your mum died a few years ago as well, didn't she? And then, you became Prince Regent, effectively a ruler. So where does that leave you now for the future? I mean, what's the state of Sealand now, and where are you at, and what are your plans for the future?
Well, our plans are and always have been to eventually try and raise some land, and we come to time we have to do something like that. I mean, my sons, James and Liam. Liam's 30 and James is 32, and 1,000,000% involved with everything. And I have 2 grandsons, Freddie and Harry, as well, so I'm sure they'll be carrying on with it. But,
When you say raise some land, what does that mean?
Basically build a cofferdam and pump sand into it, and it's all tried and tested technology.
So Sealand becomes an island then?
Yeah, it
with a
becomes
fort upon
a
it,
bit
yeah,
more of
yeah.
an island instead of just a fortress.
How deep is the water around Sealand?
It's only 10 metres.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's
built
on a bank,
sandbar.
so...
Sandbar, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, that's interesting itself, isn't it? Because, of course, in all this, there's the definition in the international law, it says the Montevideo Convention, denies that artificial islands can be states. But in fact, that's crazy because, in fact...
Dubai is an artificial island, isn't it?
And Dubai, and the Chinese are now building artificial islands and stuff as well.
So you're working backwards, aren't you? You already exist and you're just extending, so it's got to work.
Right, so the plan would be to make the island of Sealand, and as time goes by, become more and more established. Physically, the fort itself, I mean, built in the Second World War. I mean, is it structurally sound? Is it going to?
Yeah, it's structurally sound, but I mean, obviously, it's going to be a little bit more feet now. Like everything, but we do maintenance work, and we, do as best as we can.
How often do you go there now?
Not very often these days, mainly with the journalists going out or something, or some special occasion going on.
When you're just about to get married to May, I mean, are you guys going to honeymoon on Sealand?
Absolutely bloody not. I'm going to get told off for saying that now. We might go where the sun's shining, I think.
Okay, well that's amazing. So, and I think Paul's got a few questions about how you become involved with Sealand and the various...
Yeah, well, obviously, I'd like to become a lord at some point. I've always admired that. So, how do we go about that? I'm just looking at your website now. Is it as simple as me just signing on? What do I need to do?
Well, we support Sealand by we market lord and lady titles, which is an ancient way of. French kings used to market letters of marque. That's good, isn't it? Letters of marque for counts and countesses and comtesses and that, to finance their wars, to pay for their mercenaries and their soldiers and everything else. So it's not a new thing. So we have quite a good online shop.
So could we do like, for example, the British Museum? That you could buy one of the windows at the top, you could pay for that. So could I get a square metre of your new land?
We have actually thought about that, but we haven't. Yes, you can get a square metre of Sealand. You can buy a bit of territory. Yeah.
Magic. Okay.
There we go, Paul.
Christmas.
Your dreams come true.
Yeah, it is.
Listen, Michael, long may Sealand flourish, and it's amazing. So James and Liam are going to. Have they got an official title?
The princes.
The princes.
Yeah.
So they're planning to carry on.
Yeah, we made it a principality, by the way, to simplify the law, because we were a small family in a great big world at the time, and the prince's word is the law, the strong right arm and all that kind of. That's why we did that. I mean, hopefully one day it would be nice to run it by a senate,
Amazing. We should also mention that you have done various things on the international stage, mainly sport, actually, haven't you? Could you talk a little bit about the Sealand and sport?
We have just about every kind of athlete in the world, runners. We've even got a curling team, curling?
Yeah.
And you're a Scotsman, eh?
Sort of.
Sort of. You come from that neck of the woods, anyway, skiers, jumpers, everything, all sorts.
Right, so you've always been very proactive in sort of establishing Sealand with its international relations and stuff, and it's become famous around the world. And you've got so that's going to increase, as you think, as time goes by, particularly in the age of the internet, in a strange way. Actually,
the internet opened the door totally to the world. I remember my father did use publicity years ago at one point the British government was spoiling when we were first out there, they were spoiling all the stores. They'd open every tin of beans. The customers would come down and they just make a nuisance of themselves, and they tried. And under the 30-year ruling, I spent quite a lot of time in Kew Gardens at the government records office there, and I've seen some fascinating stuff.
Tell us about that. The 30-year rule. What's that?
Well, the 30-year ruling is that things that were government papers that were hidden and secret, whatever, have to be revealed after 30 years. But funnily enough, that sounds a great idea, but there's actually quite a few slips of paper in amongst the other papers saying destroyed and the date. So they were actually destroyed them before they've been allowed to get into the 30-year ruling thing. But it's a great thing because you can see, I mean, I even found one of my grandfather's dog tags, in a file at Kew Gardens, from the First World War. There's, so just to be able to read, I mean, that the attempt when the British government sent the policeman out there that we discussed earlier on the Navy boat, it's all there, And it's actually not only is it there, but it's there from the point of view of the guys that they sent out that obviously didn't want to make themselves look stupid about the mere fact that these 2 James Bonds had been sent out there basically and couldn't climb a bloody rope ladder. I mean, what's that all about? You'd think a Bond can do anything, can't he? Jump from building to building and all that, So.
No, I love it. Well, listen, long may Sealand's sail on, as it were, and I guess you are completely free of any concerns about Brexit. It's not going to affect Sealand in any way whatsoever, is it?
Well, we never were really for. I mean, it's a bit of a strange thing, isn't it? Because I remember as a boy, I suppose when it was all going about, Britain wanted to join the common market, and it was, by the way, just a common market. It had nothing to do with you're going to have this kind of army and that kind of army. The whole idea of it was for free trade. I don't think anybody really understood it was going to end up governing your country and telling you how many immigrants you could let in or not let in, or this, that, and the other. But I do remember that. Something that sticks in my craw a little bit was that in those days they didn't want us in the common market, and it was President de Gaulle of France who it was always. I remember as a boy, front page on the paper every time there was a conversation about it, no, de Gaulle says no, and he stopped us joining it. And everybody thought he was a terrible man. Now I suppose he was still there. But of course, de Gaulle spent the war in London while we looked after him and liberated his country from him. So that was all a bit strange, wasn't it? But people have very short memories, I suppose. But personally, I personally never really wanted to join it. It probably won't help me with the other business I have. Leaving it makes it a bit more complicated, and they might put trade tariffs on things. But
Sealand will be, thankfully, free of all such concerns. Michael, your book, Holding the Fort, is an amazing story for these stories and lots more. And where can people find you in Sealand? Where's the best place to go?
Well, on the internet, sealandgov.org. There's a website there and the online shop, and tells you all about the history of Sealand and all sorts of bits and bobs.
Good. Thank you very much, Prince Michael of Sealand.
My pleasure, gentlemen.
So there we have it. What about that for a story of nautical, piratical counterculture? A real David and Goliath story. Just the sort of story we love at the Bureau of Lost Culture. You can find out more about Sealand, as Michael said, at sealandgov.org. You can find out how to become a lord or a lady or a duke or a duchess of Sealand, maybe own a little bit of Sealand yourself, all sorts of other wonderful things. And of course, check out Michael's brilliant book. You can find out more about us at bureauoflostculture.com. Lots more stories from the other side, stories of human resistance, rare, lost, half-remembered, unusual stories from the counterculture. We're going to finish with the national anthem of the Principality of Sealand, the smallest country in the world.